Welcome to this episode of the Be in the Know podcast, brought to you by our team at Stiles Financial Services. Each episode, we pick a topic and attack it from all angles, delivering insight and knowledge to you, our listeners. I'm Glenn Gray, and in this episode, I have the distinct pleasure of speaking to our Community Service Fund recipient, Michele Hein, co-founder of Fentanyl-Free Communities. For Michele, it really was a calling that brought she and her co-founder, Paul Ostrow, to start Fentanyl-Free Communities. It started after Michele and her family lost Tyler at age 23 and a half to fentanyl poisoning. Tyler struggled with addiction and was on the mend when he slipped up and took a pill that contained a high dosage of fentanyl that ended his life. A life filled with promise and laughter. As Michele describes Tyler, he was such a funny kid, making us laugh at every turn. He excelled at sports from a very young age and became a three-sport athlete, playing lacrosse and football for Stillwater High School and hockey goalie for Stillwater Junior Gold A. He achieved the great honor of being a United States Marine 3 months after graduating from high school. He had almost completed yoga teacher training and held a class next to the lake for his mom and girlfriend only 6 days before he passed away. Many stories have been shared about what an amazing friend Tyler was. Everyone loved him, and that holds especially true for his family. Mom, dad, sister, grandma, aunts, uncles, and cousins, everyone who knew him. Tyler was truly one of a kind with the biggest and most loving heart. As Michele says, we miss his impressions that would make us belly laugh until we'd cry. And fentanyl stole all that away from us. And so we fight. We fight to save others from the same fate. We fight to educate about the dangers. We fight to distribute life-saving measures to the public. We fight for legislation to stop the spread and distribution of fentanyl. And we fight so that other families don't have to experience the heartache and pain of losing a loved one. And we fight because Tyler was a fighter, and he would want us to. And with that, here's my conversation with Michele Hein, talking about fentanyl-free communities. All right. Well, Michele, welcome to Stiles Financial. It's been great getting to kind of start to know you. Today we've got Michele Hein. So you are a founder and board member of Fentanyl-Free Communities Foundation here in Minneapolis. So, I think what we want to talk about a little bit is about Fentanyl-Free Communities, how it started and stuff. How we got involved, each year we come up with a community service fund, we find a foundation or a charity, and this year Fentanyl-Free Communities was the chosen charity. So we'd love to hear a little bit about what you do and your role within, and how the progression of fentanyl has just been such a problem in Minnesota and around the country. Right. But I don't want to do all the talking. I want to introduce Michele Hein, our guest today.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for choosing us as your charity of choice this year. It goes a long way. Every dollar goes a long way. Our board members are all volunteer. We have one administrator that helps us keep the clogs running. But we were established in February of 2023. My co-chair is a retired prosecutor from Anoka County, and in January or February of last year, he called me out of the blue and said, I saw you in the Star Tribune, an article on something that I had done at the Capitol. And he said, I was wondering if we could get together and talk. And we met, and we have not looked back since. He wanted to do something in his retirement that was productive and meaningful, and he had prosecuted many fentanyl cases in Anoka County, some successful and some not, and for high-level dealers. And our family lost a loved one, my son, in July of 2020. So I always wanted to do something meaningful as well around fentanyl and raising awareness and educating and advocating for policy change at the Capitol, because I had not heard about the word fentanyl until 7 months before Tyler passed away. And it is the most deadly illicit substance the United States has ever seen. And I feel like that was a travesty that I hadn't heard of what that pill or what that drug was. So we started Fentanyl Free Communities. Susan has been a supporter since day one. She feels the feels and feels the passion for helping keep kids alive, essentially. So I really appreciate her continued support.
Yeah, it's one of those things, when you hear about fentanyl, it kind of seems like one of those, like, it's not a me problem. It's one of those things like it's other people. Right. I don't really have to worry about it. But obviously, you're an example of how close to home this can hit. Tell us a little bit about Tyler.
Oh, Tyler, he was such a bright light in so many people's eyes except his own. He struggled with some mental health issues and then subsequently ended up struggling with substances. Fentanyl was not his drug of choice. He liked to smoke pot and have a beer. And I know that he dabbled in other drugs, but he knew fentanyl was in the supply chain, but he did not go seeking fentanyl the night he died. He went seeking a pill that these dealers sell on the streets that'll make you feel better or take the edge off. But nowadays, 6 out of 10 pills have a lethal dose of fentanyl.
You don't know what's in something like that.
And unfortunately, Tyler had been sober for 4 months, hadn't had anything. And when you don't have tolerance for opioids built up in your body and you get fentanyl, you most likely will die if you're not, if somebody's not with you that can administer naloxone, which is an antidote to opioids.
Right. I saw on your site you have kind of a 10-point process, all right, for trying to fight fentanyl coming in, trying to get legislators thinking about changing laws, making it more difficult. What's the process, or what's the most effective way that you guys are kind of, because 10 ways hitting it, that's a lot of different ways, right?
Lot, yeah.
What kind of things are you doing or finding effective?
So we're almost 2 years in to this organization, and we hit the ground running, and it took off so fast that we haven't hit all 10 points yet. But what we have found is been most effective is getting in front of people in our communities one-on-one or 1-on-100, doing assemblies and having community organizations and awareness events. And a lot of the communities are very open to that, and a lot are not. Yeah. Because as you said, if you talk about it and you manifest it, it'll probably happen to me. So I'm not going to talk about it. I'm not going to bring that into my circle. But then I go out and I share with people that you better bring it into your circle. Yeah. Because kids are going to be kids, and kids like to experiment, and they always have. Yeah. Unfortunately, there's a drug in our illicit supply chain now that you don't know it's there. You can't smell it. You can't taste it. You can't tell it's there, and then it might be too late. So we have really focused on community outreach and awareness. Okay.
2 years is not very long, especially when you're trying to get something by legislators. Yeah. That's like,
and things like have decades. Passed at the legislature. We supported a couple of bills that they had on the dockets for years, getting Narcan in schools and increasing the penalties for fentanyl to at least equal that of heroin, because you could carry more fentanyl and have a lesser penalty if you were dealing or distributing than heroin, which we know fentanyl is 50 times more powerful than heroin.
Just going to say that's
and
insane.
So we supported organizations that have been working on those for years, and that's just kind of what we continue to do, and we continue to look and see what didn't work last year at the legislature, what we think that we want to continue to push forward. Sure. And to be clear, we're laser focused on fentanyl. Yeah. We understand meth kills. We understand that prescription opioids can kill people, but our focus is fentanyl.
Yeah. Wow. What kind of communities are you hitting? So you're hitting in Minnesota, complete Minnesota, the whole state. Are you hitting some of the Native American communities? Where are you finding this is taking hold?
So it's everywhere. Nobody is immune to it. But we do know that people of color and the indigenous population are dying 4 to 7 times faster than any other population. We do have relationships with the Indigenous Peoples Task Force in Minneapolis.
Okay.
And actually there's somebody from there on our board. We also are working with the Somali community, the Hmong community, the Quran community, and just recently the Latinx community. And it's different. I've learned a lot because what happens in my community and how things are communicated in my community are so different than in the Somali community or the Latinx community. But one thing is for certain, the stigma of using drugs or abusing drugs or being an addict or a substance user is the same. Stigma is stigma. And that's one of the things that we try to work around as well and try to educate people that people don't wake up one day and say, I want to become a drug addict.
Right. And also, a lot of that, to your point, it seems like it gets hidden because nobody wants to admit it, right? So you're not just kind of like, partly an addict.
Right.
By the time it really gets addressed, it's usually because there's no other course of action.
That's correct. And you just don't know if your brain is going to have that addictive chemical that an opioid gloms onto, and there's no looking back.
Yeah.
You can't just go, oh, never mind, I'm done. Your brain doesn't allow you to do that.
How is this getting into Minnesota?
So it comes into our country. The precursor chemicals are sent to Mexico, and then the clandestine labs in Mexico most often press them into pills. They have pill mills, and they make these little blue pills that have all kinds of illicit substances in them. But fentanyl is cheap and very addictive and powerful, so they use that. And they're not measuring out the perfect amount, so if somebody takes a pill, they don't die. They're just putting it in there, and it can be 100% fentanyl, or it can be 2 milligrams of fentanyl. But it only takes 2 milligrams for an adult that does not have an opioid tolerance built up in their body to pass away.
Wow, that's really scary.
It is scary.
And it's amazing because I've talked to my kids. Now my kids are out of high school now, so but you would talk to them and they wouldn't give you too many details, but I mean, pills, all this stuff. I mean, it's in our communities here in Edina. Yep. It's in every community where you don't think it is. Now, I don't know. I feel like, and this is behind the shroud because I don't know. I don't really see what they see. Right. But I know they've kind of talked about, well, this is too much, or they don't want to get involved in some of that. But it's just circulating, and all it takes is.
So you asked specifically how it gets into Minnesota. It's coming straight up 35 from the south, in legal, cars, trucks, but it's also coming through the U.S. mail. Pretty much anybody can go onto social media right now and buy a pill and have it delivered to their door, either via USPS or DoorDash or any. And I'm sorry, I don't want to use the word DoorDash, but not DoorDash, not DoorDash. But those kinds of avenues, so easy. It is so easy, and it happens over and over and over again. So we at Fentanyl Free Communities use the money that you donate to us to be able to go out and put the tools in young people's hands so they learn. Their parents and their caregivers learn, and then they can go into their schools and their communities and also spread the word that this is not something to be dealt with lightly. Here's a sheet of emojis that you need to stay away from because this means heroin, this means fentanyl, this means Xanax, but it's not really a Xanax. They call it a Xanax, but it's all fentanyl. So we go into the communities and educate so the kids pause before they make that decision to use an illicit substance. We don't want other families to be in the situation that we're in.
Right. Now, I know we've talked a little bit about is there a way to recognize if somebody is using fentanyl? Like, are there certain things to look out for?
So, yes, friend groups change, withdrawing, quiet, eyes change, snappy, sick to their stomach. Because if they realize what they're doing and they want to try to stop, they get violently ill, especially from fentanyl. Fentanyl is, I guess, one of the worst things to withdraw from. And it's very hard, but it is possible. But what we want to do is not have them get to that point, right?
Sure.
And then those that are in active opioid use or fentanyl use, or we want to just do what we can to help them understand and believe that it's okay to get help and get better and live a different life than they're wrapped up in.
Yeah. Because I know I've my kids have talked about going through Uptown. Like Uptown has gotten pretty bad.
That's why everybody should carry naloxone.
Because now you got is it Narcan or into schools, and are there places in public that have it? You know, like.
Yep. There's an organization in town that provides naloxone access points all over Minnesota. It's very, very intense in the 7-county metro area, like where you can go to get it. And they're businesses like yours. They're you can walk right in, request Narcan and fentanyl test strips, no questions asked.
Interesting.
There's no age limit. You don't need a prescription, and they will give it to you right then and there.
Wow.
And that's called the naloxone access points in Minnesota.
So can businesses
sign up to do it?
Do it?
Yep. And they want to make sure that certain areas aren't as saturated. So if there's somebody right down the hall, they probably wouldn't have you do it. But if you wanted to do it, you would just call. You need to have regular business hours. You know, there's some requirements for it. But we truly believe that all the grassroots efforts are helping bring that national death rate from fentanyl down. And it has gone down for the first time in over a decade from 23 to 24.
Okay, yeah.
It's minor.
I think, I read something.
In Hennepin County, it's not gone down.
I was reading that the fatal overdoses have gone down.
Correct, fatal overdoses.
But the non-fatal has gone up.
That is correct.
So
that's because we're saving them with Narcan.
Right.
And people are carrying and they're not afraid to learn how to use it and to use it.
Right. I was going to say that through education and your efforts that are kind of, it's not that use has gone down entirely.
No.
It's the fatal overdoses has gone down.
That is correct. Yeah.
Wow. So it's a long slog. You're 2 years into it, and it's going to take a bit more. I'm 2
years in with the foundation, but I'm 4 years into wishing I would have known everything I know now beforehand. So I'm doing what I can to make sure other people do know, and make sure that I feel like I'm out there giving them permission to have these conversations with their friends, within their family units. Right. It's okay to have the conversation. It's not an easy conversation, but it's a necessary one, because this is not a drug that discriminates. It's everywhere, and it doesn't care what color you are, what age you are, what gender you are, what anything. Talking about communication. So, how would you go about talking to your kids about fentanyl? I would get information in front of you, because moms and dads don't know anything, right? Caregivers, we don't know anything.
Well, in kids' eyes, we know even less.
Exactly. So, boy, if you could get another young person to talk to, and that'd be great. But then you got to get the information to them. But just to make sure, there's so much information on the internet right now from the Drug Enforcement Administration, from the CDC, from the Minnesota Department of Health. just a plethora of information, especially about fentanyl. And I would get as much information. And then they also have how to talk to your teens, how to talk to your middle schooler, how to talk to your mother or father who is using there's so much information out there, and I would learn all I can, and then I would just ease into it and say, there's something you need to be aware of. You're going to be starting to go to parties, and if somebody pulls out a pill and here's this piece of paper that I got off of the DEA website, and these pills look alike, but this pill will kill you. You just gotta use those words, and you have to be, and of course you're using the words that are appropriate for the age group. But we don't believe there's any age too young. I mean, you can't tell a 2-year-old, and it wouldn't make sense because they're not around things like that. But
it's typically around 16 to 34.
Yeah, that's what they're saying. But then in my community, I was running some numbers with the sheriff a few months ago because I needed to know for a grant I was writing what the age group was, what the drug, I needed all these statistics. And the age group in our neck of the woods that are dying from fentanyl is over 45. That's what we said. Because he was reading it to me and he says, "Hey, Michele, this doesn't go with what you tout. I mean, you always 18 to 35 or 18 to 45, and these are all over 45." So it just
do you think it's cyclical? You were talking about depression and anxiety, right? And that's
COVID definitely had something to do with the increase, no doubt about it,
right? Yeah. I look at so many kids now are dealing with depression and anxiety and stuff, and something like this, they may look to other ways to self-medicate.
Absolutely, and they're being deceived to death because they're not being told it's a pill with fentanyl. They're being told it's a Xanax or a Percocet.
Yeah, this will calm you down.
You can't find fentanyl in a legal prescription drug that you get from a legal pharmacy. And FYI, there are no legal pharmacies online. There are no legal pharmacies online. I wish that this wasn't a thing, but it is. And so parents, we're expected to protect our children. So you have to have a conversation with them because that's your job.
Yeah.
And 7 months before, I started talking to Tyler about fentanyl, but it just wasn't. He was too far into an addiction to opioids before.
Well, we're happy that you're involved in the organization. It's great, having you out there and your voice at the legislature, at schools and communities. It's really making a difference. And I'm so happy that we've been able to pair together. This has been great, and I really appreciate you coming in to talk. And if anybody needs resources, we'll post them below. But you can go to Fentanyl Free Communities. Is it communities? .org. And get all the information, learn more about Michele and Paul and the whole organization and ways that you can help. So before we sign it, how do people get involved and what can they do?
So many ways. They can just simply reach out to me. My contact information is on the website. You can fill out a volunteer form if you want to volunteer in any capacity, whether you want to be part of policy or advocacy or awareness or education. You can keep an eye out or create something in your own community and have us come and present. We have a speakers bureau. We can send people out to speak at your Kiwanis, at your Rotary, at your, I can't even name them all, Lions, any of those types of organizations.
Sure.
But the most impactful is getting in front of people like assemblies in schools. Something that I'm taking on personally this next year is I want to get in front of every sports team at the beginning of their season that I can in any school district.
And why sports teams?
Because kids that play sports are dying from fentanyl. I mean, whether they have an injury and they get hooked on opioids and then they don't give them any more opiates and then they end up going to the streets and they get fentanyl, or they're indestructible.
Yeah.
Right? A lot of them. They at a party and they're having fun and some kid takes a handful of pills out of their pocket. Hey, you want to have one? And somebody says, no, I'm not going to partake. And I don't do that. They take it. He sees everybody else took one. They're having a good time. An hour later, sure, I'll take one. And he gets the one that has the 2 milligrams or more of fentanyl in it, and he's dead.
Yeah.
Like, they need to know. And they have more power with their peers as well because they're looked up to and they're respected, and they can share with their peers that it's not a good idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
All right. Well, best of luck, and thanks so much for coming in. Really appreciate it. And again, check out fentanylfreecommunities.org for more information and pass it on. Stiles Financial Services is an SEC fee-only RIA in Minnesota. Information presented is for educational purposes only. No listener should assume that any discussion or information presented serves as the receipt of or the substitute for personalized advice from Stiles Financial or any other investment professional, and is not intended as an offer of solicitation for the sale or purchase of any specific securities, investments, or investment strategies. Stiles Financial Services is not a law firm or accounting firm, and no portion of this program should be interpreted as legal, accounting, or tax advice. Information expressed does not take into account your specific situation or objectives, and is not intended as recommendations appropriate for any individual. Listeners are encouraged to seek advice from a qualified tax, legal, or investment advisor to determine whether any information presented may be suitable for their specific needs.